And we go farther down the
Good
rabbit
morning,
hole.
everybody.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good to see everybody here on this beautiful Sunday morning that God has given us. And so let's go ahead and start off with the word of prayer. Gracious Father in heaven, we give you thanks for this day and this opportunity to be in your word. Lord, we just pray that as we begin a new study today, that you would guide us and direct us as we go. That the things that we would learn here today, we would be able to apply in our lives, and we would be able to take into the world and to live lives that are pleasing to you. Even in the times such as these where we have struggles, to know that despite what we see and despite what's here, what's happening to us today, that you are behind the scenes, that you are in charge, and that you are taking care of us. And Lord, we just lift us all up to you, and we pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Today we are starting Esther. And Esther is kind of an interesting study that we will come in. I'll be honest with you, this is the first time I've in-depth studied Esther. It's one of those books that is in Scripture. However, there have been some questions of whether it should be in Scripture. And not because of its truthfulness or anything from that standpoint. One of the big things that you're going to find out about Esther, the book of Esther, that the writer does not mention God directly. The word God is not mentioned directly. Now, for those of you who might have seen the Sight and Sound version of Esther, Queen Esther, on this, there are several references in that particular play that would completely go towards God and would do it. However, the book itself does not. The two people that we're going to really be looking at a lot of in Esther is obviously Esther herself and Mordecai. Mordecai was the relative of Esther who was her guardian. Yeah, that's probably the best way to put it. Was her guardian. Now, the one thing about it is that Esther is a Judean, and she was a faithful Judean, and so was Mordecai. And in that time, the one thing that we do understand, and we will understand from Esther, is that she continued to keep her faith. Now, as we go through this, what you're going to find out is this story is one that is, while it's not the same story, the same basic theme is in this that was with Joseph. It's not a good time. It's not a good time for Israel. There are struggles. We are going to see in this evil, sin, and corruption that's going to come into play in this story of Esther. We'll probably go through this fairly quickly because a lot of it's going to be more narrative that we're going to get here. But in the end of this, what we're going to see is we're going to see a pattern of God working behind the scenes. It will allude to that many times in this. But like I said, because of that, there have been some that have, even Luther kind of questioned a little bit, should Esther be a part of the canon? But when we take a look at the Old Testament, pretty much, for the most part, there was a reason that it was put into the canon. And that canon was pretty much there, at the time of Jesus, with the Old Testament. New Testament, much different. But Old Testament, pretty much, the canon had pretty much been established. And what I mean by the canon, just simply what's considered the books of the Bible. Okay? And if we take a look at this, the author, we really don't know who the author is. And there's not a problem with that. That's like if you were to hear a good, a good sermon on the radio, would you necessarily ask who the author is, right? There are a lot of things that are out there. But the one thing that we do, more than likely, the author was a Judean scribe of some sort. It could be a rabbi, a Judean rabbi. We don't really know. But there are many writings in the church that are not necessarily, that we don't necessarily know the author. Today, the authors, I mean, because of digital technology and those kind of things, the fact that you can almost always find out the author, but in those days, it could have been one of any of many rabbis that have written. It could have been part of originally meant of what was called a midrash. What's a midrash? A midrash is a questioning or a questioning and answering that many times would happen in the temple. I've known some Lutheran pastors that tried to, in their service, to add what they call a midrash in their after their sermon, where what they would do is they would give the sermon, and after the sermon, people would be allowed to ask questions. That's a good thing. It can be a good thing or a bad thing. It depends on your congregation. Obviously, obviously in this congregation there are some people that can ask questions. And but then there again, there's some other times when I might ask a question and I hear crickets, right? and so part of it's going to depend on the moods of the day in that. And the problem with it in our Lutheran service is that we have a flow that we stay with in the Lutheran service, and that would be an interruption. I mean, for me, you know how I am. If somebody popped up with a question in the middle of the sermon, I would answer it. You know, in fact, I asked you this morning, and I'm going to ask you guys a question in late service. We'll see what you all say. I'm not going to give you the answer. Don't ask anybody from early service, because I'll know that you did.
Oh, God. Yes.
No,
Okay.
we're all here.
Yeah.
We're here. We heard it.
Sorry.
We know.
I was looking at the parking lot.
I would know, because with the answer, if you came up with completely the exact words of the right answer that I'm looking for, I know you talked to somebody in early service.
Oh, we don't know. It's one of those trick questions.
Yeah.
Really, what was that again?
Well, I'm moving
He
down.
said they don't remember what you said.
Think lightning's going to strike
Yeah.
on a sunny day? But no, it is one of those things where it could have come from something like that, something like that from that standpoint. We don't know specifically, because there are writings, there are writings that we know very specifically who wrote them, but there are other writings that we don't necessarily know specifically who wrote them, that were part of a collective. And that's what we've got to look at Esther. But the one thing about this, is that as we look at it, we do know that it was written, and it was written in a way that at the time that the rabbis believed that it should be part of the canon. It looked like he was going to get ready to ask the question.
Yeah, no, you know me and timelines. What's the time? This is during the Babylonian captivity again, isn't it?
This is written about 400 BC.
So that still answers my question.
Before the fall of the empire.
Yeah, before
Yeah,
the
so
Persian
it's
Empire
written.
fell to Greece.
Are they returning already,
Yeah,
or are they?
yeah, this is.
Yeah, that's what I was just gonna think, is this during
Okay.
Jeremiah, or?
Yeah, in those kind of, yeah, in those.
Hellenistic period. This is
Um,
Yeah, it still doesn't help.
You look, all right, actually, one of the things as we get into this is it does place this in a very specific time
Oh,
frame.
okay.
478 BC is when, is actually the date at which, I'm gonna actually use his nickname, okay? His actual name, the king that we're gonna be talking about here is Ahasuerus. It's Ahasuerus is the king. Now, we also know this guy as Artaxerxes. Artaxerxes. So I will probably refer to him more as Artaxerxes than anything. The Hid was king. He married Esther in 478. It's a period of time where they are under the Persian. That might help you. They are under the Persian captivity, and they're returning. It's before the. It's after the temple was destroyed. The second temple was completed in 516, and so they were coming back.
Yeah, so
Does that help?
Yeah, this is after, when they're starting to come back.
Yeah.
Jeremiah said, okay, this is the king that didn't care if they stayed there, they'd let them go back, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Not necessarily.
Nehemiah. But yeah, this, like I said, most of this is happening right at, after 516 is when a lot of this is happening, okay? Remember, we're going backwards. 516 is longer than 478, okay? Because this is BC. The walls of Jerusalem were restored in 445. So that's when things were there. So the place was the Persian Empire, which the Persian Empire was from India to Ethiopia. Huge. You're going to have the main people that you're going to see: Esther and Mordecai, Hagal, Artaxerxes, Vashti, which she is, you're going to hear about her right off, Memucan, and Mammon. Those are going to be some of the main characters that are going to be in our play here today. And we'll start hearing some of these. The purpose of this is to record the Lord's providential deliverance of the Judeans from destruction by their enemies in the Persian Empire. We are going to see in this some manipulation. We're going to see manipulation by people who would seek to do Israel harm. In fact, it's in the midst of imminent destruction that God turns the tables, in essence. It's in those times that we're going to see how God is in control, and that God is guiding the people of Israel and protecting the people of Israel, despite the fact that they've been dispersed.
Yeah.
Remember, the dispersion was not to destroy Israel. It was to teach them a lesson. And what was that lesson? God is in control. If you want to do it your way, go ahead. Okay?
You'll find out.
And to some extent, I believe, we are seeing a picture of that in today's life. Some of the things that are happening in the church are a pruning. Now, I want to be very careful about that, because there's another guy out there that's written a book here recently that talks about God's intentionally coming in to destroy. No. But he does talk about things of God is printing the church. And that's one of the reasons why the church is struggling in some areas. I'm not quite that's almost a theology of glory in the way that he approaches it, because what he does is that the church is getting exactly what it deserves, and if it just turns and does this, well, the problem is there's still a lot of faithful people in the church. Probably 25% of the church are still solid, faithful Christians. The ones that are struggling are the ones that have given in to the sin of the day. We know who those are. I'm not going to hash it out.
And I have the Concord in the Luther Bible,
Uh-huh.
and it says Luther on Esther, and this is a quote: "The greater part of a nation always belongs to the devil and is idolatrous."
Uh-huh.
I'm like, wow.
That's
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
I mean, people run around going, "Oh, people are good," and da-da-da-da-da, and I'm thinking, "Oh, they're not."
Yeah, well, that's the thing. I mean, that's why the thing about it is that I always, when I go to funerals that are done by other denominations, and they get up there and they ask for a eulogy, and so here we are, and they're waiting for people, and people get up. Well, he's a really good guy. I've known him for years. He's a really good guy. Oh, I remember this story when we went over and stole Mr. Jones' thing. It's like, Mr. Jones' chicken or whatever. And it's just like, okay, he's a really good guy, but he just went over and he stole something. Right? It's those times that I feel like standing up and just saying, if he was so good, why is he in the box? Right?
Well, if only the good die young. Haven't you ever heard that saying? The
Yeah.
good die young.
Yeah.
I guess I must not be good.
Well, I'm still here. I'll probably live here to be 125.
But
Say a word.
haven't killed me
Keeping it
today.
down.
So. But no, it is one of those things where it is one of those things where we look at it, but the reality of it is, and I'm not going to get too far onto this because I might reveal something, but about late service. But the reality of it is that we've always got to look at the fact that we're all sinful. We are all sinful people. It doesn't matter who we are. We are all sinful. And because of that, because of sin, that's out there. But and Martin Luther, he likes to get people riled up. And the reason for that is he doesn't want them to fall prey to it. So in a way, Martin Luther's quote here is one that he says that because guess what? If I'm a church-going person and I'm just going through the motions, what are you going to do? You're gonna stand up and say, that's not me, and that kind of stuff, and start really looking at things. And that's kind of why Luther does some of the things that he does. And I do that sometimes.
You want to get a discourse going.
You want to get a discourse going, but also he wants to do it. It's like when I stood up and asked you guys, how many of you guys are murderers? It really is the same. In essence, it's just a different thing to that. How many of you guys are murderers?
Jonna wasn't too sure.
You see hands. I better see every hand up. No, but it's like when I get up there and do that. At first, I imagine you all were thinking, who did we bring into this place?
Yep.
Yes, we
It
were.
was
Who is this guy?
Especially when you screamed at us, we were all sinners.
Sinners, yeah.
Yeah.
The first Sunday.
First Sunday, I didn't know about it. But that was the thing about it is though, who is this? But that's the thing about it is though, Martin Luther would do those kind of things. Now, he was a little bit more crude than I was, than I am about a lot of his approach. But basically, he called a duck a duck, is what he did. And that's the thing about it. But today, you understand it. But because you all are kind of like, well, I got to hear what this is all about and everything. But now that you all are here 8 years later, and I say, how many of you are murderers? It's not, you understand it. And you understand it in our sinful side, that's who we are. But yet, that iniquity has been taken away by the blood of Jesus Christ. That's the law and the gospel at work. And that's what Martin Luther likes to do. So he's actually saying it. And so he's saying to it, and the reality of it is that we could say that too. In this nation, most of the nation was still given over to Satan.
Yes. And we're still tempted.
And we're still tempted.
Big time.
I mean, we could fall.
Yeah. But most of it belongs to idolatry. But here's the one thing about it is, though. Are we given to idolatry?
Yes.
Are we?
Oh,
Yeah, we
yeah.
are. Sometimes we can be.
Without a doubt.
Sometimes we get pulled by some of the things that are in this world. And I was talking, was it Vince Bible study yesterday that I was saying one of the big idols that's, you were the one that reacted to it. We're getting ready for one of the biggest idols to go back on the field today.
Yep.
And I'm not saying the Browns, okay? But football. How many people on a Sunday game when they should be in church, they dress up,
Hate themselves.
they paint themselves,
They're up at 4:30 in the morning.
they're up at, they get up at 4:30 in the morning no matter what. It doesn't matter what the weather is, they're tailgating back behind there. They're spending bucks. I mean, let's face it, to go to a Browns game is going to cost a family of four. You're probably going to spend $600-700 by the time you're done. They give their money, they give their time, they give their homage to all of this. And do they put that much effort into church? I mean, for what's the season? 24 weeks?
16 game.
17 weeks, 16 games.
They're not counting Super Bowl.
Well, no, I'm not counting playoffs.
Yeah. Not counting
We're not used to that.
playoffs and, huh?
We're not used to playoffs.
Yeah, Christmas we're done.
Yeah, Christmas we're done.
Just regular season. Let's just go regular season. 17
2008
weeks. Some
we're
of
good.
those people are every one of those games spending $600 at every one of those games.
Maybe more if they're traveling.
Maybe more. I'm not saying that all of them, but how many of them are giving $600 a week to their church?
Well, what about the ones that spend season tickets?
Huh?
The season
The
tickets.
season ticket holders.
Oh, yeah, because you're buying premium seats. So, I mean, yeah, but, I mean, it's insane.
Even the ones that don't go to the games are still planning more into,
Okay, we're done today.
Into that, and getting out, they're more dedicated to go to the game than they are to go to church.
well, just more
And so-
dedicated to how they're gonna watch the game, you know.
And
All the
yeah,
rituals and all the snacks and all that associated with it.
And then you ask somebody to do snacks for Sunday school, and it's like, and it can be like pulling teeth sometimes. Not all the time, but sometimes. And so, think about it. And I'm only saying this, I'm not saying anything about our people here, but think about it. There are people that claim to be Christians that put more effort into that football game. And the worst part about it is that the football game's gonna let you down this year. Why? Because evidently, the way I understand is they're gonna have Black Lives Matter here, or Black Lives Matter there, and you're gonna see protests. You're gonna see them dissing, as they say, the American flag, all of those kind of things. And so their God is leading them astray. Is that idolatry? Yes. Yes. And we all have those false idols. And what we've got to do is remember to push those things off. And so what Martin Luther is saying is not wrong. Is not wrong from that. But it's not only that. It can be all kinds of things. But that's where, for the faithful, but they're still the faithful that still are in church. They're still, but the problem is, and I have to say this, one of the problems that we have is we're teaching our children to be idolatrous. Every time that we give in and give in to a sport and say, well, it's okay this time, are we not being idolatrous that way? I mean, sure, there are some occasions. But when we start giving into sports that continually, Sunday morning, rather than standing up and saying, and this is where the bearing of the cross could be. Standing up to the coach and saying, Sunday morning is church time, we can't do it. Well, your child can't play.
It used to be like that.
It used to be like that. But now it's not.
Wednesday nights and Sundays.
Wednesday nights and Sundays. But standing up to the coach and saying, my son or my daughter cannot do it then. It's a bad time. We go to church as a family. And it's required in our family. Well, your kid can't play. Well, then I guess he can't play. That's bearing the cross. That's bearing the cross.
Kid probably doesn't necessarily
Well,
understand.
the
It's
next,
a lesson for him.
then the
but-
next step is to go to the school board. And then maybe we get an attorney. But see, we won't go that far. Because that's bearing the cross, isn't it? It's bearing the cross. I mean, all I'm doing is saying this stuff to make us think.
Well, we did it
Because
to-
it's
we
so
did it to
easy.
the
Oh,
coach.
believe me, I've had some very faithful people give in to that.
But when will the church, as a whole, stand up to this stuff?
They're trying to. You would be surprised the amount of money that the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod is standing up to these things. The problem is that we live in Babylon.
Yeah.
And,
What does it say? A greater part of the nation always belongs to the devil. That's just,
well, the problem is we're in Babylon right now. We are in Babylon. And the problem is that, yeah, are we going to be able to do it? But here's the problem. If you don't stand up to them, what's going to happen?
You're gonna get rolled over.
You're going to get rolled
We're
over.
gonna get
That's
rolled
exactly
over.
what's happening. The sins that we are now reaping the reward for the sins.
we have to hope and pray that the remainder that's left, he's always gonna promise that there'll be some believers that we are stay part of that group.
And that's what we pray. I mean, I don't have a problem with most of the people in this room.
Still.
They're still gonna be, you're gonna remain faithful until the end of the race. But the problem is that that's why we've gotta continue to fight the fight, even though we're tired.
Yeah.
That's why we've gotta continue to speak up, even though, and that's why we gotta continue to encourage, not encouragement isn't for us, but it's for our children and our grandchildren and our great-grandchildren. I mean, most people here have been blessed with children that were brought up and they still are in church and they're still believers and they're still those. But you gotta realize that the bully will always bully you until you stand up to them. Satan will always attack you until you stand up to him.
Yeah.
And the problem is that we have a generation that's kind of rolled over to the school system when it comes, not just to the school system, but to any sports system that has made sports the higher priority. and I'm not saying that these programs are bad, okay? I was in sports, I did it, but it's like I was talking yesterday at men's Bible study. I remember when I was able, I took an extra class in high school. In high school, you could come in at 7:30 instead of 8:30 and take an extra class. And I took an extra class every year at high school. I was able to come to high school, take my extra class, do all that, do my sports, because I was in cross country and track and rifle and pistol when I was in high school. I was able to do that. I had sports all the time. I was also in marching band. Okay, I was in marching band and all, and pep band. So I did the basketball games and the football games and all of those kind of things. And you know what? Most evenings, unless it was a meet evening, I was home for supper.
They didn't do it on Sundays.
And got my practices and everything done.
On Sunday.
Got my practices and everything done.
Back then, they didn't do the games on Sundays
Yeah.
either.
No, they didn't do games on
No.
Sundays. No, it was
Friday nights
Tuesday and
and
Friday nights.
Yeah.
It was basketball games.
Yeah.
Football games were Friday nights.
Yeah.
And occasionally a Saturday. But the thing about it is, though, is I was able to still practice. And my practice for cross country. We started off at the high school and we ran to our practice field, the park, which was 1.5 miles away. And then we did a full practice where usually we would do 5 in different, they break it up, we usually did 5 miles of running. And calisthenics and all those things. And then we ran back to the school. And I'm still home by 6:30 every night. Today,
But that was before they added girls' sports.
no, it wasn't.
Well,
New Albany High School had every single sport for girls. In fact, they had
But
more
how
sports
did
then
they-
because than
how
now.
did they have facilities that couldn't be, I mean, this was the argument that came about when using every night of the week.
Uh-huh.
Because the facilities had to be used by all these different teams.
Our gym had 4 courts.
Our school had one.
Yeah.
Well, that's where the
Ours
difference
was
was.
too.
It
But
was
we
girls
were
that
a
caused all
huge
this.
school.
I agree with you, Gary.
I beg your pardon.
What did he say?
What did he say?
He said it was girls.
That caused all this.
No, actually, this was when, what is it?
There was,
Well, a
What
lot
is it,
of,
Prop 903 or whatever?
Yeah.
there's
Isn't that the one that said-
1,500 at our school, for the sophomore through seniors.
Well, the thing about it is that the school systems work with each other and they share gyms
Oh, well.
and those kind of things.
well, not
If
only
you only
that
have
though,
one
but
gym, you're out. You know.
where I went to school, the group, and this was, when I graduated in '72. So the girls' sports were mostly intramural.
Yeah.
We didn't compete with other schools.
That's when it moved from.
Yeah.
You got rid of GAA, and all of a sudden you want an interscholastic
Let me ask this.
volleyball and basketball and track and field.
Well, yeah, I don't want to get in, but that's like what I said, my cross country, we couldn't,
There's
that's
more-
why we ran to the park.
Yeah.
It's
There's more
because we
demand
did
for
cross
this time.
country at the park, not in the football field. Because the soccer team was in the football field, or the football
No,
was in.
soccer team was at a different park.
Oh, was it a different park?
They were a community
Her
park.
brother was in.
But still, there's more demands on young people's time,
Well, now they gotta
no
work.
matter what it is.
And,
Yeah.
now you gotta work,
I
and
mean-
you
Gotta
gotta
work.
Is there
more to
really?
pay
Yeah.
for the sports.
Is there really? I mean, let's ask it. Is that man-made?
Oh,
Yeah.
without a doubt.
Yeah.
Without a doubt.
Is it a problem with, priorities?
In our generation, you could go out to play, right? Now the generation, it's kind of like, almost like structured playtime.
Well, maybe if we got rid of these,
Yeah.
Wouldn't hurt.
and because, and those type of things. I know what it is, I hear the kids complain about it, And I look at it and I say, so what's different now than what it was, other than you spend a lot of time on your phone?
Yeah.
I
But-
think some of it is the expectations of the parents today over what the expectation was of my parents.
Yeah, because-
and
Yeah.
your
My parents wouldn't allow me to work on Sunday morning. My job, I
Yeah.
could, where I worked at, I wasn't allowed to work on Sunday
To
morning.
date my wife, I had to date
I
my wife,
know.
I had to go to church with them on Sunday night. I actually sang in their choir. I sang in a Baptist choir, and I'm not a choir person.
And he sang solos in the Baptist choir.
And I did that. This is what I used to do Sunday morning. What I used to do
Well, you
is
were
I would
spit-
go to my church, and then after I was done at my church, I would go to her church, so I could see her.
Isn't that special?
Knew she was the one.
The thing about it
for
is
sure.
though, is I had a busy life. And I filled it up, because I had a job. In high school, I had a job. I did all those sports. I had my homework. I did all that. I carried an extra class, and I was still able to be home. That's a priority, that's a time management issue. That's not it. But I don't wanna get, I don't wanna get off, because we can talk about this for the whole time. But what is the priority when we come here? And that's one of the things, what I wanted you to kind of see was that we're dealing with some of the same kind of things, idolatry and those type of things that are happening with this. And like I said, there are different things. The problem, yeah, I understand, some places didn't have 4 gyms. I mean, we didn't have 4 gyms, we had 4 bays. That was actually built 77? Because it was one year we didn't have a gym. So that was it. But where I'm really going to it is the question that really comes to it is that, and you're right, it's expectations of parents. Has the expectations of parents become idolatrous?
Yeah, in a lot of ways it has.
I used to promote, I shouldn't say promote, I used to say this, and I said this to some of my well-to-do parishioners, is that have we gotten to a time of child worship where our children have to do everything and we come second?
In the transition from fellas to gals, I believe it was the parents that pushed the gals into sports
And, well,
like the boys.
Yeah,
I think so, and I don't
exactly.
know if-
I think
You know,
so.
and see, that's the one thing about New Albany High School that I went to, is that that was never a problem. Because girls had basketball, girls had volleyball, girls had swimming,
soccer.
girls had soccer, girls had all of that stuff at the high
We
school,
had
like in
powder puff,
nineteen
It
seventy-seven.
football.
depends on
We
the
didn't have
school you're
football,
talking
we had
about.
powder
If you're talking a rural school, you don't have all of that.
Yeah. But see, that's a priority too. That's a priority issue as well, isn't it? The reason is they can't afford to pay a teacher to be able to do those sports, right? So where is the parent stepping up and helping?
The board picked it up, that's all I know.
Yeah, I mean, it really is. If you really want to do it, we can look at it. But even in a rural school, the reason, because I hate to tell you, and is that I went to Brunswick. I was a vicar at Brunswick. We didn't have money to pay people to do those things. You know who did them? The parents and parishioners. Parents and parishioners volunteered to do those things.
Coach Dill.
They were willing to help when you asked them,
Yeah.
because they wanted it to
They wanted to,
succeed.
yeah, they wanted to. And so a lot of that stuff is there, and I'm not gonna, yeah, it's, yes, the push to the equality of girls, which, like I said, I never saw a problem with that. And I am one that is a proponent of the equality of girls. Believe me, we tried to get our daughter to play softball. My son loved baseball, and we tried to get our daughter to play baseball, and she just wasn't in it. Hers was swimming, and so we pursued swimming with her. But I think that, yeah, I think that both boys and girls should have equal. But at the same time.
And we think they should be in sports, it's a great thing, but
That
not
may
to
not
the
be the-
effect to take over on Sunday morning.
Yeah, I mean, the whole point behind it is not whether it's good or not, because I think it is good that girls and boys have the same opportunities. That's it. However, the thing about it is, though, is that what we've got to do is have we crossed the threshold to where it becomes idolatry? To where we force our kids to be in so much that they're literally exhausted at the end of the day. Are we putting things in the right perspective when it comes to our spouses? Because actually in a marriage, the kids are second. It's the spouse is first. In a healthy marriage, the spouse, because the reality of it is, and most of us have realized it, is guess what? What do the kids do?
They grow up.
They leave. They leave. And then then what? If you have a healthy marriage, and you've worked on that marriage, then if we put that spouse first, and that's what God calls us to do, is put our spouses, God first, and then our spouse, then our kids and parents.
God first.
God first. Because if God's first always, and that's what the center of idolatry is. When we do not put God first, we've got to put God first. And when we do that, the rest of the things will fall in line. How we're supposed to treat our spouse, what we're supposed to do for our kids. And number one rule for our kids is what? Nurture them in the love of the Lord. And so if we want to get legalistic about it, if we allow schools to take over during the period of time, I don't want to say schools, because it's not just schools, it's teams. There can be travel teams, and those. If we allow, let's just split it. If we allow sports or activities to take the place.
It could be camping.
Well, it could be camping. It could be anything. That's why I said activities. If we allow sports and activities to take the place of God, is that idolatry?
Yeah.
Yes. And so we've got to approach it that way. I know that sounds rough and tough, but that's the word. Isn't that the way it goes? Isn't that the way it is? God says this: I am a jealous God. Thou shalt have no other gods before me. And so my job as the head of the family is to do what? To raise my family in the love, raise my family and nurture them in the love of the Lord. And so if I abdicate that by allowing them to do all these other activities rather than being in church, am I staying true to what my calling to God is? This is something to think. And I know we've kind of gotten off, but this is a problem that we have, and we're going to see this kind of mirrored in a way. Obviously, with this, it's not sports. It's going to be other things. We see it mirrored in other ways. And we're going to see the possible destruction of Israel again. Because there are people who were racist then. If you want to call it that. It really wasn't racism. It really is. Because they didn't like the Jews. That's racist.
May I put one more thought in this, and it's a little off your target?
Sure.
When you're talking about a school that was much bigger than Eastwood. I was a farm community.
Oh, yeah.
I was in the athletic director at the time. We started 3 girls sports.
Yeah.
Okay, what has happened since that is we had to play the same number of games as the boys.
Yeah.
Because we didn't start with an 18-game schedule for girls.
Yeah.
then it moved up to this. And it was mom and dad talking to the school board that wanted these things.
Yeah, but that's the problem on the parents' side. I'm not talking about this, it's not the school fault. It kind of comes down to it. It's not the school's fault, it's not those, it's the mispriorities of the parents.
But if you think about it, the kids in the cities didn't have anything else to do.
Yeah.
So a sport was a good thing to be involved
Yeah, 'cause
in.
you
and I
guys
would
were-
encourage the
you
parents
guys
to
had to
try to
work
get
on the
them
farm.
going.
I mean, the guys, most of the kids had to work on the farm when they got home.
There's the point.
Yeah, it is.
You could
Kept
get
them
away
out of
for a
trouble.
little bit, but
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I know, that's a big thing. And believe me, Bowling Green is a semi-rural community. You had both of those, the school that my kids went to. Yeah, I mean, it's a double-edged sword, is what it was. And yeah, I understand that, but where I'm coming from is not the fact that that's right or wrong, because I believe girls should have the same opportunities and all that, and that. My problem is that with the priorities that people in general put, is that as Christians, we're supposed to put God first.
you're right.
And so they shouldn't be coming to you. Problem is that they got what they wanted, but it didn't look like what it should, right? Because what happens is
Didn't
they
turn
got
out
what,
the way it was supposed to.
yeah, it goes back to, I guess it's the show Bedazzled, which, I love this, it's Brandon Fraser, and I can't remember her name, who's the lady that plays the devil? Elizabeth Hurley plays the devil. And the guy, she comes to him and she says to him, and this is going right back to what Martin Luther's saying. She goes back to him and says, I will, if you sell me your soul, I will give you anything that you want. So he says, well, okay, I'll buy. I want to be rich and powerful. Fine. Snaps her fingers, all of a sudden he's rich and powerful. You know what she makes him? A drug lord. And so what do you think the first thing that's happening?
They're trying to kill him.
Is you got these commandos coming in, shooting up the place and everything, and he covers his head and everything, and he does this time after time after time. The problem is that we ask for things, and when we get them, it's not what we expect. And so, but see, the thing about it is that with God, we know what to expect. God's not going to put these other demands. Oh, we want our daughters to have exactly this. Okay, that's fine. Now all of a sudden you've got a situation where they're so busy they're falling asleep on the car on the way home, and they're not going to church on Sunday.
Yep.
And so that's when you have to stay as a parent and say, have I become idolatrous? Have I made my children idolatrous in this?
After
Because now
girls got a foothold, that grew, and then Sunday afternoons got busy with athletics in some,
Oh, yeah.
maybe what are parents in the area that started a soccer team,
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
and it's that way now.
It is, and that's the thing. And now the pressure's on. You have to do travel teams if you want to
Oh, yeah.
get the. And I'm not saying that stuff's bad in and of itself. Here's the reality of it is, most things in this world are not bad in and of themselves. Paul talks about this. When Paul talks about meat that is sacrificed to an idol, he says, what's the big deal here? There ain't no such thing as other gods other than God. So you throw a steak on the Barbie and say, this is to Allah, and you feed it to me and I eat it? What's the big deal? Okay? Doesn't change my relationship with God, right? But there might be weak people out there because of it. There might be weak people out there because of it, and so if that's going to cause a brother to fall, I don't partake in it. Things are not good and bad in and of themselves. When I say this is not good or bad in and of itself.
It's a tool.
It's what I do with it. Right? Sports are not good or bad in and of themselves. It's what position in life we put to it. It doesn't matter. Even the Bible itself is good or bad in and of itself. If we take it and we put it on our shelf and we don't open it, is that a bad thing? Yeah, it is, because we're not hearing the Word of God.
Take it and read it
But if we
and
take it,
through it.
read it, and inwardly digest it and do all that we're supposed to, it becomes the most powerful thing on this world.
If you take
One
it
more
and
thought,
twist it.
please.
Sure.
In the size of school that I was in, the
It's like
kids,
20.
after time, could still manage the sports,
Yeah.
the 3 sports that I was talking
Yeah.
about. But when we moved to Tiffin, you didn't see the kids in church nearly as much as you did in Pemberville.
Yeah. And part of that probably is because of the attitude of the parents.
Yeah, because that was a German Lutheran community.
Yeah.
And the church was the center, and the church said, we will take Thursday night, that's the night, and Sunday, you can't have those.
Yeah, yeah, and that's what I
Yeah,
said.
the parents
The
fell in love
sports
with
in
it.
and of themselves are not good or bad. I think sports are good. I ran cross country. I ran track. I shot rifle and pistol.
Try to get that into the.
You can't do that today.
Oh yeah, try to get a gun into a school. Well, it
Yeah.
depends on where, we see that from up here, but then you go down to Bowling Green, Kentucky, half the trucks there have gun racks and they got
Yeah.
shotguns on school property.
Texas too. Yeah.
Well, who knows?
Yeah.
8 years ago they did. But the thing about it is though, is that I shot, and you know where we kept the guns? We had a locked storage room on the second floor of what we called the annex building. It was basically, it was connected to the school and everything. And so, guess what? Every afternoon,
Sign them out.
every afternoon, no, we actually had our own, a particular rifle that was ours. A number rifle that was ours. We knew which rifle that was. Every afternoon, after school was over, as soon as the bell rang, we walked over to the annex building. We waited outside for the teacher to come, unlocked the thing. We strapped our rifles to our shoulder. We walked down the building because we didn't shoot at school. They didn't have a range. We had to walk to the community center, which was 4 blocks away. And here you go. There were 23 of us on the team. 23 of us toting rifles, walking down the
That's a
streets
visual
on
for
school
you.
property towards the rec center.
Which is not on school property.
Try that today.
Yeah,
No
23
way.
kids, 23 high school
That's
kids
right.
walking somewhere
With
in a
rifles.
group with rifles.
That's right, that's what we
Not
did.
gonna
That's
happen.
it, I could just see
That's
that.
what we did. That's what we did. But you know, the thing about it is, but once again, we're kind of.
We are way
off
off.
track.
Way off track.
We haven't even got to Esther.
So, but actually, I mean, it comes down to the comments that Luther is saying. It really is about the devil and idolatry, okay? Themes that we have: weakness before one's enemies due to disobedience, the Lord thwarts grudges and hatred. And the gospel theme, preservation of God's people for whom Jesus, the Lord, works constantly with the deliverance of his people. And that is, those are the things that we're looking here at Esther. So let's go ahead and we got a few minutes, let's go ahead and touch in with that. I didn't want to get into
Yes.
I really didn't want to get into a discussion about sports, but it
Esther
is
1.
about idolatry. It is about idolatry and those kind of things, and what Luther says. Now, in the days of Ahasuerus, the Ahasuerus, who reigned from India to Ethiopia over 127 provinces. In those days, when King Ahasuerus sat on the royal throne in Susa, the capital. In the 3rd year of the reign, he gave a feast for all of his officials and servants, the army of Persia and Media, and the nobles and governors of the provinces were before him, while he showed the riches of the royal glory and the splendor and the pomp of his greatness for many days, 180 days. So, let's stop right there. First 4 verses, basically, is giving us a very specific period of time. Okay? It is telling us exactly where it is. It's telling us exactly where he's reigning from. It's telling us exactly what's going on. We know that it's the army of Persia and Media. And that he's having us party. Can you imagine having a 180-day party?
Yeah.
We've had
I need to be a
180
cook
days
for
of
that.
that
Yeah, really.
party, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
we've been
done
having
that
our
for
own
100
party at home.
Yeah.
That's right.
So
180
space-
days of party. But what was the
Yeah.
purpose of this? To show off his glory.
Sure.
What he was doing was he was showing off his glory and what he had accomplished in that. So he had this party. And when these days were completed, the king gave for all the people present in Susa, the citadel, both great and small, a feast lasting 7 days in the courts of the garden of the king's palace. And so here we see some of his benevolence in a way, because for the city, after he's just had this 180-day party for the officials and all that, now he's getting ready and he's having a party for the city. Okay, basically, it's a city celebration for another 7 days. And he goes on to tell us there were white cotton curtains and violet hangings fastened to the cords of the fine linen, in purple to silver rods, in marble pillars, and also couches of gold and silver on mosaic pavement of puffery, marble, mother of pearl, and precious stones. Drinks were served in golden vessels, vessels of different kinds, and the royal wine was lavished according to the bounty of the king, and drinking was according to this edict. There is no consumption, for the king had given orders to all the staff of his palace to do as each man desired. Queen Vashti also gave a feast for the women in the palace that belonged to King Ahasuerus. And so, okay, here we have the queen. She's actually throwing a party for the females. You know, we were just talking here, and Gary left. It says the females had to have their party as well, okay? And so, but the whole purpose of this is to do what? To show the glory and the lavishness of the king. To show all the greatness and what he has accomplished and what he has put together. And so, already we're getting an idea. Yes?
I just have one question, because, and tell me if I'm off track here, but it says, for the king had given orders to all the staff of his palace to do as each man desired.
Uh-huh.
Was this an orgy?
Probably.
We don't really know specifics, but
Because it sounds like that's what's happening between the two
But
people.
I would probably say that probably was what was going on.
Lavish
Okay.
wine.
Mine also says that the king set aside the custom that everyone had to drink whatever the king drank.
Yeah.
So they
Yeah.
weren't compelled to drink his wine.
Yeah, they were the party. They were basically the party. If you wanted to bring your own bottle, BYOB, you could do it. You know, it was one of those.
First BYOB.
Yeah, basically what he did is he
Yeah, yeah,
suspended all the rules, but I would probably wager to say that within this, there was probably that circumstance as well.
That's
Did
what
you
I'm
hear
kind of
what's-
getting out of
Well-
that, because when the word desires used, that's
Yeah.
usually where it points.
And
Yeah.
mine says drinking without restraint.
Yeah, you know what happens then.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, you know what happens with,
It does sound like
I
it.
wouldn't directly call it, I wouldn't put it on the same level as a Roman orgy or something like that.
Yeah.
But they were probably
But it was a
giving
wild
into,
party.
Wow.
they were probably giving into desires, okay? So that's how I would
It's
see
ice
that.
cream. It's a wonderful time.
There is no compulsion. What was,
10.
some of this gold and stuff, that's all what came from Israel too,
Well, yeah, I
when they
mean,
destroyed the temple.
Fine linen, green, purple,
Well, they were taking some of it back though.
mother
Silver.
of pearl.
they were going to get some of
Not at
that
that point
back,
in
but
time yet.
still, at the point in time that this happened, that it was, that Persia was kind of in its heyday.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's conquering and everything that was there, had happened.
Was large, I